I couldn't believe what I had just heard. Standing in my own kitchen, the same kitchen where I had prepared thousands of meals for my family over the years, my 12-year-old grandson Tyler looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're just old, Grandma. You don't understand anything about the real world anymore." The words hit me like a physical blow. This was the same boy I had rocked to sleep as a baby, the child I had picked up from school every day for 3 years when his parents were going through their divorce, the grandson I had spent my life savings helping to support. And now, because I had simply asked him to put his phone down during dinner, he was dismissing me as nothing more than a relic. But what hurt even more was the silence that followed. My daughter Sarah, Tyler's mother, didn't correct him. My son-in-law Mark didn't step in. They just sat there as if what he had said was perfectly acceptable. As if I really was just some old woman who had outlived her usefulness. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling of the house that had been my home for 37 years, I made a decision that would change everything. The next morning, while Tyler was at school and Sarah was at work, I picked up the phone and called my real estate agent. You see, what my family didn't know, what they had never bothered to ask about, was that this house, the house they all assumed would be theirs someday, was worth considerably more than any of them realized. The neighborhood had been gentrified over the past decade, and my modest 3-bedroom home was now sitting on prime real estate worth nearly $800,000. More importantly, it was mine, free and clear, and I was tired of being taken for granted in my own home. Let me tell you how we got to this point, because this wasn't just about one hurtful comment from a 12-year-old boy. This was about years of being treated like I was invisible. Like my only purpose was to serve everyone else's needs, while my own feelings and dignity were completely disregarded. It started 5 years ago when Sarah and Mark were going through their messy divorce. Sarah had moved back in with me temporarily with Tyler, who was 7 at the time. Of course, I welcomed them with open arms. What grandmother wouldn't want to help her daughter and grandson during a difficult time? I cleared out my craft room to make space for Tyler, turned my peaceful home into a bustling household again, and threw myself into helping them rebuild their lives. The temporary arrangement stretched from months into years. Sarah got back on her feet financially, found a good job, even started dating again. But somehow, moving out never seemed to be a priority. Why would it be? She had free childcare, free meals, free housing, and a mother who asked for nothing in return except basic respect and consideration. And for a while I was happy to provide it. I loved having Tyler around. I loved being needed again. After my husband Robert died 6 years earlier, the house had felt so empty. Having my family there made it feel alive again. I convinced myself that this was what family was supposed to be about, supporting each other, being there when times were tough. But as the years passed, I began to notice a shift in how they treated me. What had started as gratitude slowly turned into expectation, and then into something that felt uncomfortably close to entitlement. I wasn't their helper anymore. I was their servant. And they weren't my grateful family members. They were my demanding house guests who had forgotten that this was my home. Sarah would come home from work and immediately start complaining about her day, expecting me to listen and offer comfort while she left her dishes in the sink and her clothes scattered around the bathroom. She never asked about my day, never seemed to consider that I might have my own concerns or interests. When I tried to talk about the book club I had joined or the volunteer work I was doing at the library, she would nod absently while scrolling through her phone, clearly not listening. Mark, meanwhile, had somehow managed to worm his way back into Sarah's life and, by extension, back into my home. Their relationship was complicated. They weren't officially back together, but he spent more and more time at my house, often staying for dinner, sometimes even sleeping over for Tyler's sake. He treated my home like his personal retreat center, leaving his things everywhere and expecting me to clean up after him, just like I did for Sarah and Tyler. But it was Tyler's attitude that hurt me the most because I remembered when he was small and I was his whole world. He used to run to me when he got hurt, used to curl up next to me to read stories, used to tell me I was the best grandma in the universe. Somewhere along the way, though, I had stopped being his beloved grandma and had become just another piece of furniture in the house. He would walk past me without acknowledgement when he came home from school. He would grunt responses when I asked about his day. When I offered to help with homework, he would roll his eyes and say he didn't need help from someone who didn't even understand computers. When I tried to set basic rules like no phones during family dinner, he would argue with me as if I had no authority in my own home. The breaking point had been building for months. There was the time I spent 2 hours making Tyler's favorite lasagna for his birthday, only to have him take one bite and announce that he wasn't hungry because he'd rather have pizza. There was the evening I came home from my doctor's appointment to find that Sarah had thrown away a week's worth of leftovers to make room in the refrigerator for takeout containers, completely wasting the time and money I had spent on groceries. There was the morning I woke up to find that Mark had used my car without asking because his was in the shop, and he'd returned it with an empty gas tank and a parking ticket tucked under the windshield wiper. When I tried to talk to Sarah about it, she just shrugged and said, "He needed to get to work, Mom. It's not a big deal." But the worst was how they talked about me when they thought I couldn't hear. I had learned to move quietly around my own house, partly because I didn't want to disturb them, and partly because I had started to feel like I was intruding on their lives. One evening, I was coming back from watering my garden when I heard them talking in the living room. "Your mom is getting really difficult," Mark was saying. "She's always hovering around trying to control everything. And she gets upset about the smallest things." "I know," Sarah replied with a sigh. "I think she's just lonely and doesn't know what to do with herself. She needs us here more than we need to be here, honestly. This house would be like a tomb without us. She should be grateful we're willing to stay," Mark added. "I mean, who else is going to take care of an old lady living alone in a house this big? She's lucky Tyler likes spending time with her." Tyler's voice chimed in then, casual and dismissive. "She's always trying to teach me stuff I already know. Like she still thinks I need help tying my shoes or something. It's embarrassing when my friends come over, and she treats me like I'm 5. I stood there in my own backyard, listening to my family discuss me like I was a burden they were generously shouldering, and I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't love. This wasn't family support. This was exploitation wrapped in the language of care, and I had been too blind to see it. That conversation happened 3 weeks before the dinner incident, and it changed everything about how I saw my situation. I started paying attention to the small things I had been overlooking, like how Sarah never offered to pay for groceries, even though she had a full-time job and was saving money by living rent-free, or how Tyler would invite friends over without asking me first, then expect me to provide snacks and clean up after them, or how Mark felt comfortable criticizing how I maintained my own home, suggesting that I needed to update this or repair that, as if he had any say in the matter. I also started thinking about my own life, and what I had given up to accommodate their needs. I had stopped traveling because I felt I couldn't leave Tyler. I had turned down invitations to social events because Sarah needed me to babysit. I had put my own interests and friendships on the back burner, because I was so focused on being available for my family's needs. When had I stopped being a person and become just a service provider? When had my value become tied solely to what I could do for others rather than who I was as an individual? And when had my family stopped seeing me as a human being with my own dreams and desires and started seeing me as an obligation to be managed? The night of the dinner incident, I had actually been trying to address some of these concerns in my own gentle way. I had made Tyler's favorite meal chicken parmesan with homemade pasta, and I had asked everyone to put their phones away so we could have a real conversation for once. I wanted to talk about maybe taking a trip to visit my sister in Arizona, something I hadn't done in 3 years because I felt too guilty leaving them. But Tyler immediately started arguing about the phone rule, saying it was stupid, and that he was expecting important messages from his friends. When I tried to explain that family dinner time was important for staying connected with each other, that's when he looked at me with those dismissive eyes and delivered the blow that changed everything. "You're just old grandma. You don't understand anything about the real world anymore." The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Sarah, waiting for her to correct her son's disrespectful behavior. I looked at Mark, expecting him to step in as a father figure and address Tyler's rudeness. But neither of them said a word. They just sat there, uncomfortable but unwilling to defend me, as if my feelings didn't matter enough to warrant even a mild correction. That's when I realized that in their eyes, Tyler was right. I was just old. I was just someone to be tolerated rather than respected. My opinions didn't matter, my feelings were irrelevant, and my role was to provide for them without expecting anything in return. Not even basic courtesy. I finished my dinner in silence while they went back to their phones, and I spent the rest of the evening thinking about my options. I was 74 years old, but I wasn't dead. I wasn't helpless. I wasn't just some old woman existing at the mercy of my family's charity. I was Eleanor Mitchell, and I had been letting people forget who that was. By morning I had made my decision. While Tyler was at school and Sarah was at work, I called Janet Morrison from Morrison & Associates Real Estate. Janet had been trying to get me to consider selling for 2 years, explaining that my neighborhood had become one of the most desirable areas in the city. She had told me that houses like mine were selling within days of being listed, often for well above asking price. Eleanor. Janet's voice was bright and enthusiastic when she answered. What a wonderful surprise to hear from you. Are you finally ready to talk about putting your beautiful home on the market? I am, I said, feeling more certain with each word. How quickly can we make this happen? How quickly do you want it to happen? She asked. I have buyers who have been specifically looking in your neighborhood for months. If you're serious about this, I could have the paperwork ready by this afternoon and we could have showings starting tomorrow. Perfect, I said. Let's do it. The rest of that morning was a whirlwind of activity. Janet came over with contracts and a photographer to take listing photos. We discussed pricing strategy. She suggested listing at $775,000, with the expectation that we'd likely get multiple offers above asking price. I signed the papers with a steady hand, feeling more empowered than I had in years. By the time Tyler came home from school that afternoon, there was a for sale sign planted firmly in the front yard. I was sitting on the front porch when his school bus dropped him off. I watched his face go through a series of expressions as he saw the sign: confusion, disbelief, and then something that looked almost like panic. He ran up the walkway with his backpack bouncing behind him. Grandma, what's that sign doing in our yard? He asked, his voice higher than usual. It's exactly what it looks like, sweetheart, I said calmly. I'm selling the house. But you can't sell the house, he stammered. This is where we live. This is where I live, I corrected gently. You and your mother are guests here, and it's time for me to make some changes in my life. Tyler stared at me like I had just announced I was planning to fly to the moon. You can't do this without talking to Mom, he said, his voice taking on that demanding tone that had become so familiar. She's going to be really mad. Your mother doesn't have any say in what I do with my own home, I replied. And neither do you. He started to argue, but I held up my hand. Tyler, go inside and start your homework. Your mother will be home soon, and I'll explain everything to both of you then. I watched him trudge toward the front door. His shoulders slumped with confusion and the first real understanding that his world might be about to change in ways he hadn't anticipated. For the first time in months, I felt like I was back in control of my own life. Sarah's reaction was exactly what I had expected. She came home from work around 6:30, and I could hear her car door slam with unusual force. She must have noticed the sign immediately. I was in the kitchen preparing a simple dinner for myself when she stormed through the front door. Mom, what the hell is going on? She demanded, not even bothering with a greeting. Tyler called me at work crying about a for sale sign in the yard. Please tell me this is some kind of mistake. It's not a mistake, I said, not turning around from the stove where I was heating soup. I decided to sell the house. Janet thinks we'll have multiple offers by the weekend. You can't be serious, Sarah said, her voice rising. You can't just decide something like this without discussing it with us first. We live here too. I turned to face her then, and I must have looked different than usual because she took a small step backward. Sarah, you live here at my invitation. This is my house. I bought it with your father 37 years ago, and I've been paying the taxes and maintenance on it ever since. I don't need permission from anyone to decide what to do with my own property. But where are we supposed to go? She asked, and for the first time, I heard real fear in her voice rather than just indignation. Tyler is settled in his school. I have my job. Our whole life is here. You'll figure it out, I said, ladling soup into a bowl for one. You're both intelligent, capable adults. You managed to live somewhere before you moved in with me, and you'll manage to live somewhere after you leave. Adults, Sarah repeated. Tyler is 12 years old, Mom. He's not an adult. No, but you are, I said firmly. You're 42 years old, Sarah. You have a college degree and a good job. You've been divorced for 5 years now. Don't you think it's time you learn to take care of your own family, instead of depending on your elderly mother to subsidize your life. Sarah stared at me as if I had slapped her. Subsidize our life? Mom, we help you. We keep you company, we help with maintenance around the house, we make sure you're not lonely. You should be grateful that we're willing to stay here and take care of you. I almost laughed at the absurdity of her statement. Help with maintenance? Sarah, when was the last time you or Tyler helped with any household chores? When was the last time you paid for groceries or utilities? When was the last time you even asked if I needed anything instead of just assuming I would take care of whatever you needed? That's different, she said, but her voice was less certain now. You're retired. You have time for that stuff. And this house would be too big for you alone anyway. Whether this house is too big for me alone is my decision to make, I said. And for what it's worth, I won't be alone. I'm planning to use the money from the sale to buy a lovely little condo downtown, and maybe do some of the traveling I've been putting off for the past 5 years. The front door opened then, and Mark walked in as if he still lived there. He looked confused and agitated. Sarah called me at work, he said without preamble. She said something crazy about you selling the house. What's going on, Eleanor? I looked at this man who had no legal relationship to me, who had no claim on my home or my hospitality, who had nevertheless been treating my house like his personal residence for months. What's going on, Mark, is that I've decided to sell my home and move somewhere that better suits my current needs. But Sarah and Tyler live here, he said, as if that settled the matter. You can't just kick them out onto the street. I'm not kicking anyone onto the street, I replied. I'm selling my house, which is my right. Sarah has had 5 years to save money and establish her own household. She's chosen not to do that, but that's not my responsibility. You're being incredibly selfish, Mark said, his voice taking on an edge that I didn't appreciate. Sarah has been here for you, taking care of you, making sure you're okay. And this is how you repay her. That's when I felt my patience finally snap completely. Taking care of me? I repeated, my voice rising for the first time in this conversation. Mark, in the 5 years that Sarah and Tyler have lived in this house, how many times has either one of them asked about my health, my feelings, or my plans? How many times have they offered to help with anything that wasn't directly related to their own comfort? I was warming up now, and months of suppressed frustration were bubbling to the surface. Sarah doesn't take care of me. I take care of her. I cook her meals, I clean up after her. I provide her with free housing and childcare and emotional support, and I ask for nothing in return except basic respect and consideration. And apparently, even that is too much to expect. You're overreacting, Sarah said, but she looked uncomfortable now. We do appreciate everything you do. Really? I asked. Is that why Tyler feels comfortable telling me I'm just old and don't understand anything? Is that why you never correct him when he's disrespectful to me? Is that why both of you treat my opinions and preferences as irrelevant in my own home? Tyler didn't mean anything by that, Sarah said quickly. He's just a kid. Kids say thoughtless things sometimes. You're right, I agreed. Kids do say thoughtless things. But parents are supposed to correct them and teach them to do better. Instead, you sat there silently while your son dismissed and disrespected me, as if his behavior was perfectly acceptable. I looked at both of them standing in my kitchen, looking confused and increasingly desperate as they realized I was serious about this. The house will be on the market starting tomorrow, I announced. Janet expects to have offers by the weekend. I'll give you 30 days from the closing date to make other arrangements. 30 days. Sarah's voice cracked. Mom, that's not nearly enough time to find a place and move and get Tyler settled somewhere new. It's more time than many people get, I said matter-of-factly. And it's more than generous, considering that you've had 5 years to establish your independence and chose not to. Mark was shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Eleanor, I think you need to slow down and really think about this. You're making a huge decision based on hurt feelings. This is going to affect Tyler's entire life. Tyler's life has been my primary consideration for 5 years, I said. I've structured my entire existence around making sure he was comfortable and supported. I gave up my craft room for his bedroom. I gave up my quiet retirement for the chaos of raising another child. I gave up my own plans and dreams to focus on his needs. And yesterday, he told me I'm just old and don't understand anything about the real world. I paused to let that sink in. Well, maybe Tyler is about to learn something about the real world. In the real world, when you're rude and dismissive to people who are helping you, those people might decide to stop helping you. In the real world, actions have consequences, even when you're 12 years old. So you're punishing a child, Mark said accusingly. You're turning a 12-year-old boy's life upside down because he said something that hurt your feelings. I'm not punishing anyone, I replied firmly. I'm making choices about my own life based on how I want to spend my remaining years. Sarah is an adult who is perfectly capable of providing for her own child. If she had been doing that all along, Tyler's living situation wouldn't be dependent on his grandmother's goodwill. Sarah was crying now, which would have broken my heart a week ago. Now I felt mostly tired. Mom, please, she said. I know we haven't been perfect, but we can do better. We can change. Please don't do this to us. I'm not doing anything to you, I said gently. I'm doing something for myself. For the first time in 5 years, I'm putting my own needs first. And my need is to live somewhere that I'm treated with respect and appreciation, rather than taken for granted. The next few days were a blur of activity and drama. The house was officially listed on Thursday morning, and by Thursday afternoon we had 3 serious inquiries. Janet scheduled showings for Friday and Saturday, and I spent Thursday evening packing up my most valuable and sentimental items to keep them safe during the showing process. Sarah barely spoke to me during this time, alternating between cold silence and tearful pleas for me to reconsider. Tyler seemed to be in a state of shock, probably struggling to understand how his casual cruelty had led to such dramatic consequences. Mark made himself scarce, which was probably wise since I was in no mood to tolerate his opinions about my decisions. On Friday morning, I was packing books in my bedroom when I heard Tyler come home from school. A few minutes later, there was a soft knock on my door. Come in, I called. Tyler appeared in the doorway, looking smaller and more uncertain than I had seen him in months. Grandma? Can I talk to you? Of course, sweetheart, I said, sitting down on the bed and patting the space next to me. He sat down but kept his eyes focused on his hands. I'm really sorry about what I said, he began, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean it. I studied his face, trying to gauge whether this was genuine remorse or just panic about his changing circumstances. What part didn't you mean, Tyler? I didn't mean that you're just old, he said, finally looking up at me. You're not just old. You're my grandma and you do understand things. You understand lots of things. What made you realize that? I asked. He was quiet for a long moment. I told my friend Jake about what happened, and he said I was really mean to you. He said his grandma died last year, and he would give anything to have her back, even if she was old and didn't understand stuff like video games and social media. I felt my heart soften slightly, but I had learned over the past few days not to make decisions based on momentary emotions. I appreciate your apology, Tyler, but I need you to understand that this isn't just about one comment you made. This is about how our whole family has been treating each other. But if I promise to be better, will you not sell the house? He asked, and I could hear the hope in his voice. Tyler, the house is already under contract, I said gently. We accepted an offer yesterday afternoon. The closing is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. His face crumpled. So it doesn't matter that I'm sorry? Your apology matters very much to me, I said, putting my arm around his shoulders. But this decision isn't really about punishment, sweetheart. It's about me making choices that are right for my life. And living in a smaller place where I can focus on the things that make me happy is the right choice for me right now. Are you going to move far away? He asked, leaning against me the way he used to when he was small. No, I said, smoothing his hair. I'm looking at condos about 20 minutes from here. You'll still be able to visit me, and I'll still be your grandma. But your mom is going to need to find your family a place to live. And that's going to be good for all of you. How is it going to be good? He asked. Everything is going to change. Change isn't always bad, I told him. Sometimes change helps us grow and become stronger. Your mom has been depending on me for a long time, but she's smart and capable, and she can take care of you on her own. She just needs the opportunity to prove that to herself. Tyler was quiet for a while, processing this. Then he said, Will you still want to see me after we move? Even though I was mean to you? Of course I will, I said firmly. You're my grandson, and I love you no matter what. But Tyler, when you come to visit me in my new home, you're going to need to remember that it's my home and I deserve to be treated with respect there. Can you do that? Yes, he said solemnly. I promise. Good, I said, hugging him tighter. Now, how about you go start your homework while I finish packing these books? Over the weekend, Sarah made one last desperate attempt to change my mind. She came to me Sunday morning with a written proposal that she had clearly spent considerable time preparing. It outlined how she and Tyler would contribute more to household expenses, help with chores, and be more respectful of my needs and preferences. She even included a timeline for when she would start looking for her own place, sometime in the next 2 years. I read through her proposal carefully while she watched my face for any sign of softening. When I finished, I set it aside and looked at her with as much compassion as I could manage. Sarah, I appreciate the effort you put into this, I said. And I'm glad that this situation has made you think more seriously about our living arrangement and how it's been working. So you'll consider staying? She asked hopefully. No, I said firmly. I won't. Her face fell. But I'm offering to change everything you've complained about. You're offering to change now that you realize there are consequences for how you've been treating me, I corrected. But Sarah, the fact that it took the threat of losing your free housing to make you consider treating me with basic respect tells me everything I need to know about your priorities. She stared at me for a moment, then her expression hardened. Fine, she said, her voice cold. I can see that you've made up your mind and nothing I say is going to matter. But I want you to know that you're destroying this family. I'm not destroying anything, I replied calmly. I'm changing something that wasn't working for me. If you choose to see that as destruction rather than an opportunity for growth, that's your decision. Tyler is going to hate you for this, she said, her voice cruel now. He's going to remember that his grandmother cared more about her hurt feelings than about his stability and happiness. That accusation stung, because my love for Tyler was genuine and my concern for his well-being was real. But I had learned something important over the past week. Love without respect isn't healthy for anyone involved. Tyler is going to learn that actions have consequences, I said steadily. And hopefully, he's going to learn that his mother is strong enough and capable enough to provide for him without depending on her elderly parent. Those are valuable lessons, even if they're difficult ones. Sarah left the room without another word, and we barely spoke for the remaining 2 weeks until closing day. The morning of the closing, I woke up in my bedroom for the last time. I had spent the previous week packing my remaining belongings and arranging for movers to transport everything to my new condominium downtown. Sarah and Tyler had found a 2-bedroom apartment across town. Not ideal, but adequate for their needs and within Sarah's budget now that she would be paying her own way. I walked through the empty rooms of the house that had been my home for more than 3 decades, remembering all the life that had happened within these walls. Robert and I had brought Sarah home from the hospital to this house. We had celebrated birthdays and holidays here, weathered arguments and reconciliations, built a life together that had been rich and full and meaningful. After Robert died, I had thought this house would be my final home, that I would grow old here surrounded by memories and visited by family who loved and valued me. Instead, I had become a caretaker and a servant in my own space, appreciated only for what I could provide rather than who I was as a person. But standing in my empty living room that morning, I didn't feel sad. I felt liberated. I felt like I was finally taking control of my own story, instead of just playing a supporting role in everyone else's drama. The closing went smoothly. The buyers were a young couple with their first baby, and they were so excited about making this house their home that their enthusiasm was infectious. As I signed the final papers and handed over the keys, I felt genuinely happy that this space would once again be filled with the joy and love of a family that chose to be together. Janet handed me a check for more money than I had ever seen in one place, and I tucked it into my purse with a sense of profound satisfaction. I was financially secure for the rest of my life, with enough money to travel and pursue hobbies, and maybe even do some of the charitable work I had always wanted to do. More importantly, I was emotionally secure. I had proven to myself and to my family that I was not just a service provider to be taken for granted. I was Eleanor Mitchell, a woman with her own needs and desires and the power to make choices about her own life. My new condominium was everything I had hoped it would be. It was small enough that maintenance was manageable but large enough for comfortable living. It had a beautiful view of the city and was within walking distance of museums, theaters, and restaurants. The building had a community room where residents organized social activities, and I was looking forward to making new friends who would know me as Eleanor, rather than just as someone's mother or grandmother. 3 days after I moved in, Tyler called me. "Grandma." His voice was small and uncertain. "Hello, sweetheart," I said warmly. "How are you settling into your new apartment?" "It's okay," he said. "Small but okay. Mom says I can decorate my room however I want." "That sounds wonderful," I said. "Have you decided on a theme?" "Maybe baseball," he said. "Grandma, can I ask you something?" "Of course. Are you happy in your new place?" I looked around my bright, clean condominium with its uncluttered surfaces and peaceful atmosphere, and I smiled. "Yes, Tyler. I'm very happy here." "Good," he said, and I could hear relief in his voice. "I was worried you might be sad and lonely." "I'm not lonely at all," I assured him. "I'm meeting lots of new people, and I'm planning to take some classes and maybe do some volunteer work. I'm busier than I've been in years." "That's good," he said again. Then after a pause, "Grandma, I really am sorry about what I said. I've been thinking about it a lot, and I know it was really mean." "I know you're sorry, sweetheart," I said, "and I forgive you. But I hope you've learned something from all of this." "I have," he said quickly. "I learned that people's feelings matter, even when they're old. And I learned that just because someone loves you doesn't mean they have to put up with you being mean to them." I felt tears prick my eyes. This was exactly the lesson I had hoped he would take from this experience. "Those are very important things to learn," I said. "I'm proud of you for understanding that." "Can I come visit you soon?" he asked. "I want to see your new place." "I would love that," I said. "Maybe next weekend if your mom says it's okay." After we hung up, I sat in my comfortable new chair looking out at the city lights and reflecting on how much had changed in just a few weeks. I had gone from being a woman whose life revolved around other people's needs and expectations to being a woman who was actively pursuing her own interests and happiness. The next weekend, Sarah brought Tyler for his first visit to my new home. She was polite but distant, still hurt and angry about my decision to sell the house. But Tyler was fascinated by everything: the view from my window, the community garden on the roof, the fact that I could walk to the library and the art museum. "It's like living in a fancy hotel," he said, exploring my small but well-appointed kitchen. "It feels luxurious to me too," I admitted. "Everything is exactly the way I want it, and I don't have to worry about anyone else's mess or preferences." Sarah shot me a look that I chose to ignore. We had lunch at a little cafe around the corner, and Tyler chattered about his new school and the friends he was making in his apartment building. Sarah talked briefly about her job and mentioned that she was looking into taking some evening classes to improve her skills and possibly earn a promotion. "That sounds wonderful," I said, and I meant it. "I think being on your own is going to be really good for both of you." "It's been an adjustment," Sarah said stiffly, "but we're managing." After lunch, we walked through the nearby park, and Tyler ran ahead to play on the playground while Sarah and I sat on a bench watching him. "He seems happy," I observed. "He's resilient," Sarah said. Then, after a long pause, "Mom, I want you to know that I understand why you did what you did. I don't like it, and I still think you could have handled it differently, but I understand it." I looked at her with surprise. This was the closest she had come to acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I had valid reasons for my decision. "I've been thinking a lot about how things were when we were living with you," she continued. "And I can see that maybe we did take advantage of your generosity. Maybe we got too comfortable and forgot to be grateful." "I appreciate you saying that," I said carefully. "Tyler told me about your conversation with him," she said, "about how actions have consequences and how change can help people grow. I think maybe he's learning some important lessons from all of this." "What about you?" I asked. "What are you learning?" Sarah was quiet for a long moment, watching Tyler swing across the monkey bars. "I'm learning that I'm stronger than I thought I was," she said finally. "For 5 years, I let you take care of everything because it was easier than figuring things out for myself. But now that I have to manage on my own, I'm realizing that I can do it. It's harder, but I can do it. I felt a surge of pride in my daughter that I hadn't experienced in years. I always knew you could do it, I said. I just wished you would believe in yourself enough to try. I'm trying now, she said. And Mom, I want you to know that I'm proud of you too. What you did took a lot of courage. I was angry about it, but I respect it. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching Tyler play with some other children he had just met. For the first time in months, I felt like Sarah and I were connecting as two adults rather than as a parent and dependent child. When it was time for them to leave, Tyler hugged me tightly. I love you, Grandma, he said. And I love your new place. Can I come back next weekend? If your mom says it's okay, I said, hugging him back. It's okay, Sarah said, and her smile looked genuine for the first time in weeks. Over the following months, I settled into my new life with more satisfaction and joy than I had felt in years. I joined the book club at the community center, started taking a watercolor painting class, and began volunteering at the literacy center downtown. I made new friends who knew me as Eleanor the volunteer and Eleanor the painter, not just Eleanor the mother and grandmother. Tyler visited me every other weekend, and our relationship slowly healed and grew stronger. Without the daily friction of living together and the accumulated resentments that had built up over years, we were able to rediscover the love and connection that had always been there. He started telling me about his life again, his friends, his teachers, his interests, and I shared my own activities and adventures with him. More importantly, he started treating me with genuine respect and consideration. When he visited, he would ask what I wanted to do, offer to help with meal preparation, and listen attentively when I talked. The dismissive, entitled attitude that had characterized his behavior when we lived together disappeared completely, replaced by the kind of loving relationship I had always hoped we would have. Sarah and I also developed a new dynamic that was healthier for both of us. She started calling me regularly just to check in and see how I was doing. Not because she needed something from me. She would tell me about her work challenges and her goals for Tyler's education, and she would ask for my advice rather than just expecting me to solve her problems. She was becoming more independent and confident as a parent, and I was able to be supportive and encouraging without feeling taken advantage of. 6 months after I sold the house, Sarah got a promotion at work that came with a significant salary increase. She used some of the extra money to move to a larger apartment in a better neighborhood, closer to Tyler's school and to my condominium. She also started a savings account for emergencies and began contributing to a retirement plan. I can't believe I went so long without thinking about my financial future, she told me during one of our phone conversations. I just assumed that somehow everything would work out, but I never made any actual plans. You're making plans now, I pointed out. That's what matters. I know, she said. And I have you to thank for that. If you hadn't forced me to become independent, I probably would have just continued drifting along, depending on you to subsidize my life indefinitely. I didn't force you to become independent, I corrected. I gave you the opportunity to discover that you already were independent. You just needed the motivation to prove it to yourself. A year after the sale, I decided to take the trip to Arizona to visit my sister that I had been putting off for so long. I hadn't seen Linda in 3 years, and I was excited to show her photos of my new home and tell her about all the changes in my life. The night before I left, Tyler called me. Have a great trip, Grandma, he said. I'm going to miss you while you're gone. I'll miss you too, sweetheart, I said. But I'll be back in 2 weeks, and I'll have lots of stories to tell you. Are you going to visit the Grand Canyon? He asked. I am, I said. And I'm going to take lots of pictures to show you. That's so cool, he said. I can't wait to hear about it. Grandma. Yes. I'm really glad you're happy now, he said. You seem different than you did when we were living with you. Like more excited about things. I am more excited about things, I acknowledged. When you feel like you have control over your own life and you're pursuing things that interest you, it's easier to be enthusiastic about each day. That makes sense, he said. I want to feel like that too when I'm older. You will, I assured him. Just remember that you get to make choices about your life, and those choices have consequences. If you make thoughtful, intentional choices about what kind of person you want to be, and how you want to treat other people, You'll end up living a life that makes you proud and happy. I'll remember that, he said solemnly. After we hung up, I sat in my quiet condominium, surrounded by my packed suitcases and travel guides, and felt a deep sense of contentment. 2 years ago, if someone had told me that I would sell my family home and move into a downtown condominium, I would have thought they were crazy. If they had told me that doing so would lead to the happiest and most fulfilling period of my adult life, I would have been certain they were wrong. But sometimes the most difficult decisions turn out to be the most liberating ones. Sometimes setting boundaries and prioritizing your own well-being isn't selfish. It's necessary for everyone involved. And sometimes the people who love you need to experience consequences in order to learn how to love you better. My grandson had called me just old, as if age were something that diminished my value as a person. What he learned, and what my whole family learned, is that being older doesn't make someone disposable or undeserving of respect. If anything, it means that person has earned the right to prioritize their own happiness and peace of mind. I sold my house while my grandson was at school, not out of spite or revenge, but out of a recognition that I deserved better than what I was receiving. And in the end, everyone in my family ended up stronger, more independent, and more appreciative of each other because of that decision. The morning I left for Arizona, I looked around my beautiful condominium one more time, grabbed my suitcases, and headed out into the world to continue writing my own story, one where I was the protagonist, rather than just a supporting character in everyone else's drama. And for the first time in years, I couldn't wait to see what would happen next.